There you go.
All right, folks, this is Rabble Rousing Rich Bergeron.
On the Tornado, Tony Panico.
And Psychic Tom Benjamin. Crystal ball on fire.
All right. I'm waiting for the system here to clean itself up, so we're going to just shoot from the hip until we get the real results and stuff in front of us here. But anyway, we got so much to talk about. Boxing is back. I didn't get to see the whole broadcast, but I know it was a pretty good main event with Shakur Stevenson there the other night on ESPN.
Yeah, it looked good.
So, did you watch it, Tony? Obviously you did?
Yes, I did.
All right, well, tell us all about it. Give us the rundown.
Well, you're right. Stevenson did look good, you know. I'll tell you one of the things that, I thought was pretty cool. I couldn't figure out how to do it myself. This is new for everybody, right? And when we had Joey I on a few months ago, one of the things he said was, like, he always felt bad for the guys that were fighting when there was no crowds there, because it's like, it's hard. You're trying to feed off the energy, and there's, not a lot of energy to feed off of. So, what they did was they were getting people to, log onto a website. It was like something ESPN, something, and you can, cheer from, your own smartphone, and then they pump those sounds into the arena. So you could hear, reactions. You could hear people, you didn't get the spot-on reaction of, like, the roar of a knockdown, but you would get, you'd hear things, and you'd hear, like, you couldn't really make out the voices, but you could hear, like, there was crowd noise, which was pretty cool. Stevenson, like I said, he looked good. Controlled the pace. Scored a knockdown, I think it was in the third round, maybe. And then finally, around the sixth round, he landed a left hand to the rib cage, and as soon as his opponent went down, Tony Weeks, called it off because it was one side. Had a couple of heavyweights on the card. Both scored knockouts. So it was a couple of knockouts. That was fun to see, and it was exciting to watch. I was just watching the ESPN card now, and the first fight, Adam Lopez, man, he won a majority decision, but boy, was that a slugfest.
So they get boxing on right now?
Yeah, ESPN.
Cool. So I don't have to watch the Seattle riots? No. All right.
No.
Yeah, so that's good. It's good to see. I don't know. I don't know how they're going to be able to continue it as far as money-making opportunities without the live gate, but we're going to get into that a little bit later. Dana White got taken to task a little bit by a guy from another sport over that issue, and fighters sort of jumping ship. And basically the guy kind of had no ammo on the previous complaints, but he kept mentioning, Dana White kept pointing to, there's only two guys complaining, John Jones and Jorge Masvidal, basically, and this is before the Conor McGregor 15th retirement story came out. So they're basically hammering him on, there's basically a need for a labor organization, and what do you have to say about it? And he says, well, nobody else is doing what I'm doing, I'm busting my ass to make sure everybody gets paid. And actually, I would say it was a better little speech than, do you want to be a fighter? But, yeah, it comes at a weird time for them because they're all up in arms now. They're going to do this big Fight Island thing, and it's going to be in Abu Dhabi, believe it or not. Yas Island.
Yeah.
Fight Island. So, obviously, there's really no regulations, no issues to worry about as far as commissions and any bullshit, really. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes down. But you consider the American fighters, like, they're not going to get their travel paid for. What's it going to be like for them to have to travel that far for fights? and if they're going to do this for a long time, Or is it just going to be that's how they do all their international fights, and they're not going to bring too many Americans over there? Who knows? But, yeah. It's going to be a challenge, and how they're going to afford it, I don't know. but this could be the beginning of a big grumbling in the UFC. More and more fighters, especially with Conor seeing the landscape and saying, yeah, I'm going to bow out. And I would have said myself, looking at the picture right now, that he would be better off fighting Floyd again in a boxing match than he would trying to make money in the UFC. Especially when they're turning down John Jones looking for millions. They're not going to give him the millions he needs anymore. Not without a live gate. But anyway, speaking of UFC, we had probably one of the most one-sided female fights I've ever seen in MMA in the main event the other night at the UFC 250. But, the courage and the tenacity of Felicia Spencer, I think, was the story of the night. And at first I thought it was kind of like pig-headed of her when she put the belt on her. Asked her if, do you want to hold the belt? I was like, what a classless move. And then she put the belt on her, and it was kind of more of a like, okay, this is an acknowledgement. You fought like a champion. It was more of a sign like that. But that was kind of a crazy moment. And she also said in her post-fight remarks that this was kind of a showing of, yes, I can go 5 rounds. So it makes you wonder if she literally held back at certain points because she really didn't want to hurt Felicia too bad, and she wanted to also wade into the 5th round and do the 5th round if she had to. But that girl got beat up for Felicia Spencer.
Yeah, and it's going to be what's next.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It's not Amanda's fault, but what do you do? I mean, where's the excitement at?
Yeah, I saw one.
They have to get another weight division much heavier. There's something. They've got to do something.
One guy on Facebook suggested that really we just start letting her.
Something like that. I mean,
we got to start letting her fight men. Is what one guy on Facebook said.
Well, yeah, which is not going to happen. But yeah. I would just. Again, maybe it's the soft old man and become softening in my old age, but I don't know if I'd let her come out to that 5th round.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know her. I don't train with her. Seth Petrocelli, I have a lot of, he's an old school guy, so he knows the situation, and he let her come out. But I was just looking at that and saying, oh, come on.
Yeah.
I mean, if she would have had any spark, Rich, did you watch all of it?
Yes. The entire fight.
Yeah. It was hard to watch to me because if she would have had a spark of any type of offense. I mean, it had to be, it was a beating on the ground, it was a beating in the clinch, it was a beating on the feet. Just, my God. And at some point, it's like, okay, this is just not the night. We're going to have to wait till Amanda gets old or something.
Yeah, and then Joe Rogan basically put the cherry on top when he said, you didn't even make a single mistake that I could see. When he interviewed Amanda in the post-fight interview. But that was an interesting dynamic of the fights last night, listening to all the fighters, just glowing over Joe Rogan. So happy to see him, because they haven't seen him in a long time. That means, hey, I'm back to business.
Yeah, that was kind of it. Yeah, now that you mention that, that was kind of strange.
Talking about how much they loved him. They're trying to get on the podcast, too, because Joe Rogan's podcast is more powerful than the UFC right now. It's getting bigger and bigger. But anyway, also there was some vicious, brutal knockouts in the undercard of this fight that we're going to get to talk to. But the analogy that I came up with on the main event was Amanda came in like a big, burly butcher, and Felicia Spencer was just a side of beef that he needed to tenderize. So that's what she did. She was just tenderizing her the whole fight, and it was every picture of the fight game in MMA that you can think of, she mastered. And Felicia was just kind of like one of those old school fighters that just does the 1-2 punching and maybe a hook or two here or there and might throw a kick. But it's just not sophisticated in her game. She's just been big fish in a small pond. That's why she's gotten all the victories. Not to say that doesn't mean she's a great fighter. I mean, obviously, the toughness of her, the ability to take punches and the ability to weather that kind of storm from a world champion just shows what kind of fighter she is. But it's just a matter of competition. If you're used to fighting minnows and you're the biggest fish in the pond, you're going to have all the confidence in the world, but your skill set is not going to be as good as those people that are fighting world beaters every day. And, just training with people that are...
what's that saying? In the land of the blind, a one-eyed man is king.
Yeah. So no disrespect to Felicia. I mean, warrior is what I would call her. She is a warrior. And I definitely would love to see her fight again. Somebody that's more along her ability set. But... championship level, she needs some work. She needs to expand her game and work on her defense. Obviously, the raccoon eyes were not a good look. So hopefully she gets some attention in that area and she'll improve, and she'll maybe get a chance to avenge that loss someday. I'm sure. If she strings some wins together, Amanda will give her that opportunity if she's still in the UFC at that point. But who knows? She might just retire because there's nobody left to beat. So, yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. You got Henry Cejudo retiring. You've got Conor McGregor now retiring for the 4th or 5th time. And John Jones threatening to retire. And then you've got the grumbling from people that want more money and are trying to renegotiate their contracts right now. So it could be a nice little tipping point. And then we also have the dark horse of the antitrust suit. It's still lingering in the court system. And it's been going on so long, I just forget to look up updates. But I'm pretty sure that's proceeding towards a trial still to this day. And we'll hear about it when it does go to trial. Or if it is settled, which is a possibility too. But anyway, the co-main event. Was it Cody Garbrandt? Is that the co-main event? Tom?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Cody Garbrandt and Rafael Assunção. Mark Henry is the VIP, I guess, of that fight, if you listen to the announcers and how they described it. Because basically they said that Cody Garbrandt had to reinvent himself, and it was great. It was a great framing of the fight, because you're listening to this story and then you're watching the work that he's obviously done in the change of his style. And he was obviously very aggressive before, Mark Henry, but he had such a cool, calm, and relaxed look in there this time. And he had way more head movement. He had way more slickness, way more range-finding ability, and just footwork. Footwork, above all, I think, was one of the things that he improved on.
Yeah, he just put it all together, and he was very professional. Like you said, I think he just hated Dillashaw so much.
Yeah, they said that too.
So much, and sometimes that can be motivation.
Yeah,
but we all know that you don't want to go into a fight for the most part like that. Kill this son of a bitch. I mean, it's just that your defense gets shaky, your cardio gets blown. I mean, you've got to just be an executioner,
right?
Not just a complete homicidal maniac.
So,
which is what he was in those past fights.
Yeah.
That's why.
So above all, he needed patience, and he needed to wait for the fight to come to him, and that's pretty much what he did. And it might be just the knockout of the year, the way it ended. I don't know if you've seen it, Tony, but I think you would even like the way that this ended, because I mean, you have your buzzer beater in the boxing world. You have your
right.
You have your probably the most famous one we always talk about, Meldrick Taylor versus Julio Cesar Chavez. The last second victory. Well, this one was a walk-off knockout, and previously the big guy known for those stunning things was Mark Hunt. And then he always had that ability to just haymaker somebody, kind of like a Butterbean style, and blow them out of the water. So this one, actually, if they were grappled, it would have been illegal because he was holding the fence, I think. He ripped the fence a little bit. And so he ducked down, he backed up. Austin Seo comes in and kind of threw like a 1-2 combo or 1-3, something like that, right hook. And missed both punches. But then he comes up from the crouch, kind of like Peekaboo Mike Tyson style, and just launches a beautiful right hook right to the guy's chin. And just lays him out as the buzzer sounds, but obviously the ref is already waving it off because he knows the guy's unconscious before he even hits the ground. It's just a vicious thudding, too. When you watch it in fast motion, like, regular speed, oh, it's such a vicious thud that you hear it, you see it, and you just know. Like, it was a half a second between the punch landing and the fight being waved off. It was unbelievable. And then
they put him up on the stool, and he fell off.
He fell off the stool. You never see that.
God damn it! Yeah,
Austin Seo never knew what hit him.
Right there.
Never knew what hit him. That's kind of turned into a tune-up fight for Garbrandt more than anything. Austin Seo is really one of those guys that has just been there, done that. He's fought everybody there is to fight. And he's been in the title picture before, but he's kind of one of those keep-around guys because he's had so much experience. He's a big name. He always comes to fight. He's tough. But he's probably not going to make a championship run again.
Gatekeeper trial horse.
Yeah. But still, it was very impressive the way he put all the pieces together and seems just like a reinvented fighter.
Well, yeah, it's what he needed to do. I mean, another loss for him would have been just an unmitigated disaster. I mean, because he had everything together, then just got off on a losing streak, so he's right back. He's right back.
And then the other knockout we got to talk about, of course, is the Mustache Mafia crew. They got slept, is what Daniel Cormier said. Sean O'Malley, we were kind of making fun of him last week. But today, after the fight, he was telling Joe Rogan that now he believes that he is the best striker in all of MMA. And he's going to prove it. So maybe we shouldn't be laughing at him. He'll come to strike us, right? What was it? Now I can't think of the guy's name that he beat. But I remember the promo. They had the big mustache on the guy. But we talked about it last week. He had a lot of experience as a crafty fighter. Eddie Wineland. Eddie Wineland.
Yeah.
But the big mistake, obviously, is you can't continue to be a good stand-up fighter if you're going to have your hands at your shoulders or below the entire fight. You can't do it. You gotta protect your face with at least one hand. I don't care if you're going to do the up jab with your left, if you know how to use it, or your right, whatever hand you jab with, whatever hand you are. But, if you can't have one hand up by your face for that emergency push away or catch, or even just, have it against your flesh so that the punch hits that first rather than your jaw, that could really save you from being knocked out in a lot of situations. And these fighters think they can just keep their hands at their freaking waist or their knees and win fights with head movement. And, you have to have fantastic head movement to do that. And there's other fighters that they don't care. They really don't care. They're just trying to get the knockout, no matter what. That's all they want to do. They're just programmed for the knockout. And they don't care for defense. They just don't even work on it, probably. But, obviously that catches up to you. You can't have a long career doing that. So I worry about that in a lot of fighters. But Eddie Wineland, he's been around a long time. That's worked for him in the past. It did not work for him the other night. At all, unfortunately for him. But, he went to sleep too. And Sean O'Malley sort of jinxed himself because he right away asked for the $50,000 after that one. And, of course, You know, if they don't have knockout of the night, performance of the night has replaced that now. But they used to have knockout of the night, and they would have given 2 bonuses out if there was that still in place. But this time they probably only gave 1, and I don't know if they gave O'Malley 1. But yeah, it's still kind of interesting to me too, that whole dynamic of fighters, even sort of big names like O'Malley, lobbying for that bonus. Even while Dana White says, "Oh, everything's fine. The fighters are getting paid properly. You know, they're not complaining too much. They're liking their contracts. They keep signing their contracts." Well, you know, when a guy that's been in the UFC long enough to get on the main event card, on the pay-per-view, is lobbying for a $50,000 bonus, you got problems. So anyway, let's see the rest of that card here now that I got this cleaning squared away. So what was the no crowd like watching the boxing, Tony?
Well, like I said, I'll tell you, the hardest thing I think for me, what they've done, and I'm watching the card right now. They're talking to Tyson Fury. I don't know if you guys have heard, but him and Anthony Joshua have come up to a 2-fight deal. So it looks like Fury still is going to fight Deontay Wilder for a 3rd time, and that was originally scheduled for July 18th, which will now be I think they said December 19th. Then it's a 2-fight deal with Anthony Joshua, and they're looking at Saudi Arabia as one of the locations. But I'm like, with Fury and Joshua, I mean, how can you not have that at Wembley Stadium? You have 2 British fighters. You know, I think honestly, it sells out 80,000 seats easy.
No, I haven't. I've seen the headlines.
Maybe there's more restrictions over there.
But I haven't read the particulars. Does this mean they're bypassing Wilder, or they're doing it win or lose against Wilder?
No. It means Fury's got to fight Wilder in, it looks like December 19th, and I think Joshua's got to fight Kubrat Pulev, who is definitely a serious threat. Pulev's a good fighter. And then if they both win, which they should both be favored, but, with Wilder, even though Fury dominated the last fight, you figure, Wilder still has that devastating puncher's chance. And you figure, Joshua, he does have what could be a, kryptonite for in his chin line. So, these are 2 not gimme fights. And then they said it'll be a 2-fight deal, between Fury and Joshua, and then and like I said, they said it could be in Saudi Arabia, but I said I don't think that makes sense. I think Wembley Stadium between 2 English fighters would make perfect sense. 80,000 seats easy.
Australia has been mentioned too.
Question.
I don't know how seriously. Australia has been mentioned too. I don't know how seriously that potential is, but it could would sort of be neutral territory, but there's also like a British influence down there.
I heard with Fury and Wilder, the 3rd fight, which could still land in Vegas again, but they also said there's a chance for AT&T Stadium down in Dallas, where the Cowboys play, because that seats 100,000 people, and Jerry Jones has hosted fights there before. And then there was talk about Macau, China. And I think a lot of this all has to really deal
China.
with how restrictions are. What?
China? Yeah, right. More likely to have them both eat bat soup at a press conference.
I don't want to do that.
Macau, that's probably closer to the bats.
What places have more restrictions? So
right.
If you figure if there's still a lot of restrictions in the U.S., by the time it's going to look for a venue, they're going to say, we're not going to risk trying to sign in the U.S. and have next to no audience there. So we're going to look at Saudi Arabia, Macau, Wembley Stadium, Australia, somewhere where we think we can have it and have a lot of fans. But back to your original question, which was, what were the fights like watching in the empty, studio? And I think when I was first turning it on, my biggest concern was when they were having like the WrestleMania shows and stuff for the WWE, and they were doing it at their performance center in, Florida. And it was like you'd see the wrestlers come into the arena, and they're trying to, play to a crowd that's not there. And you could see a lot of the guys were really frustrated because you weren't feeding off that electricity. So what they started doing was, putting, some of the developmental wrestlers in like a small crowd, and, told these guys, okay, cheer for this, do this, and give the wrestlers something to react off of. So with the fight, I was kind of, worried going into it, just from what Joey I said a few weeks ago. He always hated when a fighter, especially like a big card in Vegas, would be the opening fight of the night, and we'd have nobody there, and, you're not really hearing anything, and, in a huge arena. I think what's making this a little bit more palatable is a couple things. One, it's not a huge 20,000-seat arena that has a lot of air to fill. It's a studio in the MGM Grand, so it's a lot smaller, so the sound traps in better and gives you, like, the punches sound louder, so you're not hearing all this empty air. The other thing is you still will hear the corners, which was something you don't get in professional wrestling. You don't get, cornermen, sometimes you'll get a manager here and there, but you're hearing the cornermen, hey, throw your double jab, come on, keep working, whatever. So you're hearing voices, and that's good. And then, like I said earlier, their ESPN is having fans just send in recordings of sounds, crowd noise, cheering, go, yeah, and they just pump those sounds in to make it sound like a live audience.
Really? Oh,
like I said, you don't. Yeah, that's what they're doing. If you go to ESPN, and I forget what the link is, but it's ESPN something, and you use your smartphone, and say you just record something. You can record something, anything. You can record like instructions like throw the double jab and pivot out.
Hit him in the face.
Which is standard boxing instruction, right? Yeah. Keep punching, go for it. And they would just pump those sounds in, so you might not hear your actual voice, just like you wouldn't in a crowd per se.
Right.
But it's helping give some background noise.
Well, that's cool. That's a
better than nothing, right?
Different dynamic. I would have thought possible, but
it is. It's very different. It's very different. But you want to give the fighters, a little bit of energy to build off of. Like you and I, you can remember, some of the times you're fighting at bigger arenas and fighting at smaller arenas. And when we had Joey on the show a few weeks ago, one of the things that I discussed was 3 fights in a row. I went from the ultimate good guy, fighting in Lock Haven against Michael Jordan, with 3,000 people chanting my name to where I couldn't even hear the bell, to 2 weeks later being in Reno fighting Brian Kerr and getting people telling me that they wanted me to die, and you couldn't hear anything. It was so loud and so electric. So the following week, fighting Jesse Bond down in an empty arena at the Naval Academy with about 7 people in the audience because we were in the afternoon show. And you went from electricity to basically a sparring session. Because there was no energy.
Yeah. Yeah, I got my butt kicked at the Naval Academy. At a sparring session. But I got my revenge.
That Art Carey?
Yeah, I got my revenge big time.
Yeah. Art was a tough kid. I never threw him, but, we were always in the same weight place. I only seen him fight maybe 2 or 3 times. But like I said, he would have been a Files.
Yeah.
We would have probably locked up in the center of the ring, and just it would have been whoever went down first.
Yeah, he got me like 30 pounds overweight, busting out of my uniform. First trip off base, and I hadn't gone through the regimen that the old Marine Corps colonel that coached us was about to put us through. I wasn't doing my 7-mile runs at that point quite as easily. So once I got that done. And the other thing was he threw a lot of body shots in the first fight on me. And it was a lot quicker, obviously, a lot less time. Because I actually quit. It was the only fight I ever quit in the amateurs, even though it was sparring. I quit. I walked out of the ring and I was like, oh, yeah, I'm done. I can't do this. I can't breathe.
Well, like I said, I had seen Art fight maybe 3 times. And I remember the first time I saw him fight, and he might have even lost the fight. He was fighting. I fought Jesse Bond in the afternoon. So that night, I was kind of, handling the video cameras, and from the balcony. And I remember he fought, and it might have been a guy from Army. It might have been this guy, Jamie Friel, who I almost fought, but didn't fight in Southpaw. And Jamie ended up being a national champion. Jamie was a good fighter. And Art brought it to him. And Jamie was a little bit more accomplished, where Art was needed some more polish on him. But I was like, you know what, this guy is tough, because he's coming right to you, and he's throwing body shots and hard. And then a week later, on a card that I was not on, he stopped a guy from Lock Haven with a body shot in the first round. So it's like, as soon as you said, yeah, he threw a lot of body shots, I'm like, yeah, I know, because I scouted him. And no one, you figure, Rich, going into the Nationals in 1988, there were only 2 guys out of the 8 guys, well, obviously not counting myself, but 2 guys out of the 7 guys in my weight class that I had neither previously fought or scouted. And I'm going to tell you their names in a second. But you figure, I scouted Art Terry. There was a kid from Kentucky that fought at Lock Haven, and he ended up getting a bye, in the regionals, because he really shouldn't have been there. He fought our 172-pounder at Lock Haven and got his ass kicked. And Jordan ended up, I think, stopping him in 1 round. So you figure, I had scouted those 2, hadn't fought them. Jesse Bond, I fought. Michael Jordan, I fought. Brian Kerr, I fought. Those are the 5. The 2 that I hadn't had any scouting on was the champion, the 6'7" guy, and you.
Yeah. The 6'7"
And the only reason
guy.
I hadn't got any scouting on you is because we weren't on the same card at all. And it was funny because you were one of the 3 guys that was mentioned as my possible my last home show opponent. And they ended up picking Jordan over you.
Wow. Yeah, it was interesting the way it all wobbled around, and we ended up, for the first time ever, I think I was happy to take a loss. The night of the finals, watching that Air Force guy go to town. But yeah, I could not believe he made 185 pounds. In hindsight, I'm just like, Jesus Christ, he must have been skin and bones.
And that's the funny thing is, it's funny that with his height now, and he beat, the next 2 years, he beat Chuck Pasaccio twice. And I remember talking to Chuck going into the first fight, which was in Reno, 99. I'd already graduated. And I remember saying, Chuck, I said, for a guy that's 6'7", I said, he's going to put a lot of pressure on you. And Chuck, I think, was having a hard time because Chuck used to be was a taller fighter and would work off his jab. And I'm like, Chuck, this guy is taller than you. He's got longer arms than you. And I think that threw Chuck off. And I said, well, you're going to have to step to the side because he's going to come at you. Step to the side and run him into when they fought the next year, Chuck was doing real well, and then he ran out of gas. But the funny thing is like, you look at it like this. It's amazing a guy that tall was making 185. So, and I don't know if he was killing himself to make 185 or not. I don't know. Like I said, I fought the guy. I don't think I ever spoke to the guy. But Jordan, on the other hand, was also killing himself to make 185 on the opposite end, because when he fought, he was around maybe 174-ish. and I was about 178. 178, 179 maybe. Now, when they did the regionals that year and Jordan was going to 185, you had to weigh over the the weight limit below too. So if you were fighting 185, you couldn't weigh 174. You had to weigh 175.1 to 185. Well, Jordan had, after he fought me, he had one more fight, and then I think he got flu or something, and he was down to like 168. So when he got to the regionals that day, he stepped on the scale at like 169, and they're like, "Yo, kid, you got to gain like 6 pounds." And I remember they're saying like he was just drinking like gallons of water, and he obviously couldn't piss. He's drinking gallons of water, gallons of water, gallons of water. They gave him 2 hours, and he ends up stepping on the scale, makes it by like 1/10 of a pound. Then he goes and throws up because he's so bloated. And I remember we didn't know who was going to get drawn in the round robin that night, which they're saying I should have gotten the bye because I was a returning All-American, but I wasn't a returning All-American at 185. So they said, no, you're fighting. You got drawn to fight Jesse Bond tonight. Michael Jordan gets the bye. I'm like, that's kind of bullshit, but whatever. But they told me, Coach Cooper pulled me aside and goes, listen, we just saw him at the weigh-in puking his guts up because he's so overloaded with water. They said, if you draw him tonight, you go right to his body, and you will have him out in the first round. And unfortunately, I didn't draw him. And then they said the next night, once again, he had to do the same thing. He had to guzzle like 2 gallons of water to make the weight. And then I don't know what the deal was for nationals, like if he had to do it again, because I wasn't paying attention by that point. But you have a guy that's probably killing himself to pull himself down, and a guy that's killing himself to pull himself up.
Right.
So probably by the time they stood in the ring, there was probably a good 20-pound weight difference between them.
Exactly.
So Jordan probably pissed himself back down to about 170, and Sletton was probably close to like 195, 200.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't realize he was like a Vander Holyfield type at that weight. I didn't realize he was that low at that point, but he definitely felt all of 185 when I fought him. He was a good inside fighter, but if I had stuck to the outside, I might have done a lot better.
And you know what? And the funny thing was he didn't fight me on the inside. He fought me on the outside, but I think it was because I caught him so early that I kept him from coming towards me. Mm-hmm. And every time he landed a punch, he would try to like taunt me a little bit, and I would jump right back on him. You go back and you look at that. I hit him with a left hook within the first 15 seconds, a good one, and you see him back up. You know, I put some mustard on it, and that maybe 10 seconds after that, he lands a really good right hand. I mean, a really good one. And he stops, and he opens his hands up, and he makes a face at me. And when he did, I came right, right straight in on top of him, and basically saying, "Yeah, you hit me, and you had nothing."
Right.
But that's kind of the way I was. On my best days, I was almost like I was in a defiant mood. Like I was like, on the days I did my worst are the days where I was like, where I was like, you didn't feel like you were in a fight. Like the one against Jesse Bond that I won. I didn't think it was one of my better performances. My hands were hurt from hitting Brian Curran some head the week before, but it was so dead in that arena. It felt like a sparring session. I was like, I just felt like boxing them. I didn't feel like turning it into a fight. I turned it into a sparring session. But like the days that I was on were the days that I just came in there, and I didn't even win them all. There was one I fought a guy who was a 3-time national champ named Simon Millett from Naval Academy, and we were fighting at Penn State, and I was already coming in with a bad cut in my mouth anyway. But first of all, Dr. Cox was giving me shit the whole way to Penn State. Almost threw me out of the van on the way there. And might have been his way of just getting me kind of riled up. And that one, I'm like, I'm cut. I know I'm going to open up soon. And a judge had previously said to me in an earlier fight, because whatever, he said, yeah, you fought well, but I couldn't award you the decision. I said, why not? He goes, well, you weren't able to put a lot of pressure on him. You were like boxing. I was like, he was keeping you on the outside. I'm like, well, boxing was my game plan for this fight. I wasn't telling him because I was rehabbing my knee injury. And he goes, yeah, but you weren't brawling, so you weren't controlling the action. I'm like, but I was outlanding him. He goes, well, you did outland him, but I felt I couldn't give you the decision because you weren't fighting your fight. And then after that, I just decided, and it ended up being a blessing and a curse, because it got me back to that very aggressive style fighting.
Yeah.
But my body, for one, with the weight cut, and two, with the rehab on the knee, wasn't physically up to par to fight that style of fight. But like when I fought Simon Lett, like as soon as that bell rang, I was in such a mood. I went right into him. The guy 2-time and 3-time national champ, and Emery Cooper said to me at the end, he goes, that was one of the better fights I've ever seen you fight. And I said, I'll take the motherfucker next time. And I was like, I wish I could have fought him when I was healthy.
Yeah.
But that's what I needed mentally.
Yeah, it was definitely one of those things where if you got an injury, it made it that much harder. I didn't have a serious one, but during sparring right before regionals, the guy above me, whatever weight class was between 185 and heavyweight, I forget what exact weight, but a guy right above me used to spar with me. I wouldn't go with the heavyweight guy, but I would go with the guy right above me, and he and I went for punches at the same time, and my forearm hit his forearm and just threw my elbow right out, did something to it right before regionals, but thankfully it didn't really affect much. It hurt a little bit, but I mean it didn't affect my performance too much, and it went away by nationals anyway. I mean it wasn't that much of a factor. But anyway, we got some boxing tonight going on.
Yeah.
As you said, I'm just going to go over the co-main event and the main event. Co-main event, Jesse Magdaleno. He's 27-1, fighting Yenifel Vicente, who's 36-4-2. And this is out in Vegas, who just opened up, so it kind of gives you a picture of how their stuff is going. It's Bob Arum, too, trying to sell the business, so he's showcasing it there, Top Rank. Still up for sale, I would assume, but probably price tag went down with the shit going on. Anyway, main event, featherweights. Adam Lopez, he's 13-2 against Luis Correa, who is 12-2, and it's for a title, the vacant NABF featherweight.
That was a good fight. That was a majority decision for Lopez, and that was a war.
Oh, so that wasn't the main event. That was just...
No.
Okay, that's...
That was the first fight. Magdalena was the main event.
Okay. Box rec confused me there. And then we have fights tomorrow. There's not a lot going on until next Saturday, but tomorrow is sort of packed. There's a couple cards, one in Poland and one in Germany. So when that loads up, we'll talk about those. One of them, I believe, is a heavyweight fight. Yeah, over in Poland on Friday. Heavyweights Mariusz Wach, 35-6, and Kevin Johnson, who's 34-16-1, will be slugging it out. And Johnson has won only one of his last 6, but at the same time, Wach has only won 2 of his last 6, so this could be a decent fight. The co-main event.
Loser leads town.
Yeah. I don't know where Kevin Johnson is from, but sounds like an American name. I would think Mariusz is from Poland. Iwa Piatkowska in the welterweight co-main event. She is 13-1 against Karina Kopinska, who is 13-32 with 4 draws. Well, that's a a journey woman, as they would say. Also on the undercard, we have kind of a crazy fight. Christoph Rogalski, he's 10-31, fighting Maxim Wisłauk in his pro debut at lightweight. That's kind of a weird one. I don't know whether to call it a mismatch or not. Mismatch of the week. Main event in Berlin, Germany tomorrow night says a super welterweight matchup between Jack Kulke, 27-4, and Howard Kospolite, who is 18-7-3 for the WBO International Super Welterweight title. And then we have a guy who probably could make another living selling razors, Bjorn Schick. He is 16-0-1, fighting Martin Arsumanjan, who is 9-1-1 for the EBU European Union middleweight title. And then the other fight worth mentioning, Somebody's O's got to go. We got one of those fights this week. We got two of them actually on this card, but this is the bigger one. Middleweights, Vincenzo Gualtieri, who is 14-0, fighting Alexander Pavlov, 10-0, for the vacant German BDB middleweight title. Or I don't know what the BDB is, but I just wonder if Pavlov's bringing his dog. 10-0 versus 14-0 there. And then we've got middleweights, Adam Amkadov, who's 7-0, against Thomas Piccirillo, who's 6-0-1. And his last fight was that one draw. So, that's about it for the good stuff. And UFC 250, we didn't really finish going over the rest of the results there. We also had another one of the fights that I predicted correctly last week. Aljamain Sterling used his experience and craftiness to take out Corey Sandhagen. I think the only fight we were wrong about last week, Tom, was Alex Caceres suddenly becoming the real Bruce Leroy and beating the hell out of Chase Hooper, who had some promise coming in. He thought he was going to do a little better. But I don't even remember.
You know, the only thing you could say is mixed martial arts. And Chase just has really got to work on his stand-up game.
Right.
I'm sure he knows. Yeah, and his takedown skills were very deficient.
Right.
And Bruce Leroy, how about that, huh? Bruce Leroy.
Corey got the rear naked choke slipped on him 1 minute and 28 seconds into the fight against Aljamain. It was just a brutal showcase of what Aljamain can do. He's obviously putting it all together. And then we had Neil Magny show his well-roundedness in a unanimous decision over Anthony Rocco Martin. I think we both predicted those two correctly. And then Sean O'Malley, obviously we talked about him. And then before all that, we had Ian Heinisch over Gerald Meerschaert. That was another TKO, 1 minute and 14 seconds into that one. I didn't watch a lot of the undercard fights, so I didn't see these. But Cody Stamann was the big story. He had lost his 18-year-old brother in his sleep just a couple weeks before the fight, or a week before the fight. So he went in against Brian Kelleher, obviously with a heavy heart, and immediately started crying in the Joe Rogan interview after he beat Kelleher. And it was just like he said, they kind of predicted it, like as soon as this is over, it's all gonna catch up to him. So you can imagine the crazy emotions going through his head. But he won the fight. It was a pretty good performance. Kelleher didn't really take a lot off, but you could kind of tell he wasn't embarrassed to lose this fight. That's all I'm going to say about that. But he was a tough guy as much as he could be, and tried to press the action when he could. But Cody made him pay for it, and just fought the better fight. And then we had Maki Pitolo beating Charles Byrd. Alex Perez over Jussier Formiga. Pitolo won by TKO, by the way. Second round, 110. Alex Perez got the TKO from a leg kick 4 minutes and 6 seconds into the contest. Devin Clark beating Alonzo Menafield by unanimous decision. And then the first fight of the night, Herbert Burns getting a rear naked choke win over Evan Dunham. Just 1 minute and 20 seconds into that contest. And then, I don't know, do we have a UFC fight this weekend? Tom, you know?
Not that I know of.
So they're going to have a little break. I think I got a couple stories here, if I can get them to pop up. But yeah, the other thing we could talk about while we're waiting, Conor McGregor retired for the 4th time, I believe now we're up to. 3rd or 4th time. Sounds official. Sounds like he's done. One of the kind of funny things that came out almost immediately afterward is Floyd Mayweather, who also was famous for retiring multiple times, putting out a post somewhere on Twitter or Instagram, I don't know which, but he put out a post that basically was like, I guess you don't want some more of me. Round 2, I guess. You don't want that. And it's too bad or something. And we know Floyd actually had a mural of that fight put on the wall at one of his luxury apartments. So it goes to show you how proud he is of the first contest. And I think that would be one of the only things that would bring him back, is both of them back, really, with the money picture. I mean, even though you got a kind of hard pressed to figure out where the money is going to come from right now with the situation we've got going on with COVID. If enough people want to pay the pay-per-view, it could happen again. But I just don't know if Conor has it in him to do a full, 1 year, 2 year training camp to make it happen. And I don't know how much training he's been doing. I think he's really focusing on the Scotch. I mean, not the Scotch, the whiskey company. So he's probably thinking about, well, geez, what do I even need the money for anymore? What do I want to go and get my brains beat in any of these sports when I could make it off my name already? And you've got UFC having their difficulties, so they're not going to be able to just throw ridiculous money at him to sell fights. But anyway, he probably passed his prime, realistically. If you look at, his recent history against freaking Khabib, he got obviously thrown around. There's probably going to be a better chance that he would match well with Gaethje than if he goes against Khabib again. But they don't want to bypass the Gaethje versus Khabib fight to do it. So he's got limited options, which is kind of the same reason why John Jones is threatening to leave, because the next fight for him is basically moving up to heavyweight against Ngannou, who looks better and better every fight. He's had his weak points and his kind of disasters, but lately he's just unstoppable. So anyway, yeah, we'll have to see if that sticks, this retirement of McGregor's. But I probably would see him boxing again before he comes back to MMA, if he has an opportunity to do it, if he can do it without the UFC jumping in and saying they need a piece. I just don't see it happening as far as MMA. He doesn't really have enough of an excuse to get back in there. Just doesn't seem possible. Anyway. Mike Tyson. We gotta talk about him. Talk about comebacks. He's not quite unretiring, because he wants to do exhibitions only. So a lot of this hype train that's been going around about who he's going to fight next, I don't think a lot of it's even true. And we talked last week about how the bare knuckle offer was actually rejected on the first phone call, but somehow it went out to the press that it was accepted. This offer for Shannon Briggs. But now that's been proven that's not happening. But anyway, he's still in the news. They're still talking about he rejected another offer, and he really wants to box. He just wants to box. So I don't know if activity at all. I don't think that's going to happen. But yeah, people are excited about it. So more power to him. But wait until you hear that his signature has been applied and this thing is set in stone. Because otherwise, it's just people talking. Anyway, this article is taking forever to load up. Let's see. And the UFC parent company, too, Endeavor. I wanted to mention this about the Conor McGregor and the Dana White situation. The UFC parent company is obviously having some issues with all the Hollywood stuff, not being completely on track either because of COVID. Everything's been delayed, at least a month in most cases. So, you got a situation out there in Hollywood where all their actors that they're representing are not pulling in. So Endeavor, all their agents at that company are not making the money they're used to be making. How much does their whole outfit now rely on the UFC to keep the main company alive right now? To the point where instead of getting better, fighter contracts are going to get more restrictive, more catches, more write-offs, and basically more profit for the parent company. And that's really, I think, the worst case scenario of going corporate with the UFC like they did, and getting such a big conglomerate to take over ownership with this $4 billion offer. These people want returns. They're not going to settle for anything less than getting their money back from this deal at some point, and then starting to make a profit at some point. So, fighters be damned. I mean, it's worse than it was when the Fertittas were in charge. I hate to say it, but they were able to get away with it because they sort of were intimidating characters. These guys are able to get away with it because they're just corporate giants. And they've established themselves as the big dude on the block that you've got to compete with. So, $7.2 billion in total liabilities is what Endeavor has on the books right now. And that's only a piece of the ownership, too. You've got to consider that there was a lot of other investment groups involved in this buyout. So Endeavor's only the main player here, because they are the controlling partner. But they basically were indicating cash flow problems last year when they tried to do a public offering, but they pulled it back. Literally because of Peloton, the exercise bike company, tried to do a public offering and got destroyed or something. It was just like not happening. They weren't ready for it. So that was one of the factors that made them pull out of that possibility. So anyway, a lot of people claim, though, that Endeavor's financial troubles will have no impact on the business of the UFC because the businesses are so different. But I don't know. I would beg to differ on that one. But it doesn't look like they've jeopardized their ESPN deal. They initially wanted to have that fight in California on an Indian reservation, a Native American reservation, I should say. They wanted to do that to fulfill the contract that ESPN. They thought they were going to breach the contract, and then so Disney, the parent company of ESPN, actually had to step in and negotiate a solution there with the state of California. They decided not to pursue the fight, and ESPN waited and didn't hold the feet to the fire there for the UFC. So they didn't breach their contract somehow, and they're still doing business together. But That was an interesting part of the whole situation. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see the UFC start to see some effects of this situation and start losing more fighters over the course of the next few months. Unless, they really turn things around, and unless, everything gets opened back up and they just say, yep, we got 7 different vaccines that all work, and half the country's going to take them, and half the country's going to say, I don't want to take them. But, yeah, it's going to be a long time before they figure everything out to the point where we can have crowds again. So that's going to put a big, huge dent in the profits of all these combat sports companies. But yeah, we're definitely going to have to wait and see what happens. But the UFC is definitely struggling in some respects. But I definitely have to say, Dana White, as much as I hate the guy, he did make some good points when the dude from ESPN went after him. He does deserve some credit for being able to, stick it out and get things done and get these fights put together before anybody else. He's obviously got a staff, too, that a lot of people forget. And he, for once, in the interview, and in a couple interviews that were written before this, gave credit to that staff for really pushing it to the limit to get these things accomplished. And usually, he's perfectly willing to take all the credit himself. But, obviously this thing has put extra stress on the business, put it on him. And it's probably about as close as a compliment as I'll ever give him. But, he's handled things pretty well. He's had a lot of criticism thrown at him. And most of it deserved, because he kind of went too quickly at it. But, the best point he made was that he has not failed to make a payment to anybody in this whole case scenario. Whereas you can't say that about a lot of other people. But at the same time, you probably would think that, if he needs a loan at any point, he's taken care of. He's a very big supporter of Trump and the Republican Party, and obviously, if he wanted to pull strings, he could, I'm sure, to get one of these loans from the rescue package. But I haven't heard anything on that front yet. Anyway, till next week, I guess we're going to call it a night. I don't really have any other big stories.
Yep. Yeah, I'm going to get ready for this main event in a few minutes.
All right, guys. Enjoy it. Talk to you next week.
All right, sounds good, guys.
Adios. Thanks for stopping by.